Gear Tasting Radio is brought to you by Imminent Threat Solutions. ITS provides knowledge that empowers individuals with indispensable skill sets to explore the world and prevail against all threats. Right now, as a special thank you for all podcast listeners, we're offering 10% off in the ITS store. Simply use the code GTR to save 10% at store.itstactical.com. Welcome to Gear Tasting Radio, where we offer an in-depth look into the usage and philosophy behind the equipment in our lives. I am joined by Robert Henderson.
Hello.
And I'm Bryan Black. And today we are talking about trekking poles and other hiking essentials. So we decided, because it's spring, we would kind of get into some hiking, and now that everybody's kind of getting outdoors again before it gets too hot. I know I'm in that camp living in Texas, so thought trekking poles would be something interesting to talk about. Also called hiking poles, depending on who you're talking to. But a lot of people feel that it makes you look like a weenie to use trekking poles, and I beg to differ.
So you're going to argue against the fact that it makes you look like a weenie?
I don't care how I look on the trail, as long as it's helping. Meaning, I don't care what I have to do. If there's an advantage, I'm going to use it.
I just pretend it's a staff. Yeah. And you just have two of them. It makes me feel better.
Be gone!
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, really, I've used them probably now religiously when I've been hiking or backpacking or anything for probably 6 or 7 years now. Meaning every time I go out, I always have them. And I've learned some lessons over the years, which I'll share, because I think there's good qualities and features to look for in hiking poles, and there is also a lot of crap on the market. So kind of distilling through that is where I'd like to go with it. And then I want to get into some other hiking stuff like packs, and we'll touch on boots again, which I know we've covered in a previous episode, but
never hurts to talk about footwear.
Talk about some basics in regards to that. Really everything that's comprised on, short day hikes, because I feel that there's lots of opportunity to get out there. Most everybody should have access to something within an hour or so of where they live to be able to get out into nature, hopefully, unless you're like deep in the city. But I mean, even
go on a city hike.
Yeah, I mean, really, there's even a city hike. I don't know that I'd necessarily take trekking poles on that, but
yeah, probably not.
And I will offer the caveat now that we're talking about that, and I'm like realizing that when I've done like Go Ruck events and things like that, where I've got weight on my back and I'm trekking through somewhere, I don't have trekking poles. Like when I'm hiking, I guess, like, what do we do? Constellation. I didn't have them on that.
I wished I had them on
so
that.
That's what I'm trying to get at, is that every time that I hike with weight on my back, and I consider hiking downtown, walking around with weight on my back, I wished I had them. Yeah. Because really, to start off kind of down the trekking pole line, you really need to look at what the advantage is that they give you, and decide whether that's going to be a trade-off, whether you want to deal with kind of the extra burden of carrying those and dealing with them when you're on the move versus not having them and dealing with the repercussions of that. So the benefits that I see behind trekking poles are, one, it takes pressure and weight and, muscle use off your legs. So that's a big thing. If you can transfer some of the weight and the output that your legs are going through during hiking when you're going up and down, and you can transfer that into your arms and use the muscles in your arms, you lessen that load, so to speak, on your legs and your knees. I mean, it's so much better on your knees going downhill with trekking poles. I mean, I don't know if everyone listening has ever tried to walk down a very steep hill without trekking poles. I mean, you're walking, completely sideways almost, kind of stepping very lightly, and, you slip. There's really nothing you can grab onto except until you hit the ground with your hands. It's just, I mean, you might get lucky and have a tree next to you or a branch or something like that, but that's one of the other major benefits of trekking poles, is it gives you 4 points of contact. You've got your 2 feet, and you've literally got a point of contact with each one of your hands, so you can really dig into wherever you're at, and really slow yourself down. It's not the same as like an arrest falling down a scree field and digging an ice axe in or something like that. Yeah. However, the benefit is that you can use them to really stabilize yourself, especially like creek crossings and water crossings.
Notoriously slippery.
Yes, notoriously slippery, and also you know, there's been cases of people drowning in 2 feet of water in a stream because they get swept away by a current. I mean, it's just bad stuff happens when you're crossing streams and rivers and things like that. So the more contact you can have, the better in that regard. So those are really the big benefits that I see in them. And that's what I would argue against, is that it far outweighs the negative implication of like, oh, I gotta deal with these poles that I gotta carry around everywhere. And you know.
And I think that there's this thought that, oh, they're super heavy or cumbersome, and you have several models that just feels like almost nothing, and they collapse way down.
Yeah, I happen to bring in all my trekking poles, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 5 sets of them in here.
And so just a normal collection.
Well, and they represent what they represent too. Is I've always saved them. I don't throw them away if they go bad, because I like being able to talk through things like this and share my experience of lessons learned with trekking poles. So there are certain features. Have you used trekking poles? Do you have any?
I don't, and so I am very interested to hear like what you're looking for specifically, because I have been on tons of hikes, and like every time you bring up the benefit, I'm like, oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to.
And then you don't get any.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know they're not super expensive either.
Yeah.
You know, so.
It's one of those things you don't want to buy instinctually. You know, it's just, it's not something you go, oh, I need some trekking poles.
Right. Yeah. When I look at the gear budget, I'm like, I don't know. But I think I'm going to do it this time. Yeah. So I'm interested to hear what you look for. And
yeah. So the first thing that I look for is, so this represents like a 2-piece pole. And what I'm holding is a pair of LifeLink poles. And this was the first pair of trekking poles I ever had an experience with. And it was quite an experience, let me tell you. So this is, like I said, 2-piece. So basically the way these adjust is that there's 2 sections. There's an upper section that's like a hollow core. So either an aluminum or some other metal.
Lightweight.
Yeah, and I've seen full carbon fiber poles, so sometimes even this upper section is carbon fiber. But it's like a twist lock, so you twist the 2 pieces. I guess you're twisting counterclockwise. Yeah, you're twisting counterclockwise, and it loosens the screw that's inside of here, and you can slide that pole to collapse them.
So they go about half the size they are.
Yes. Okay. If you have a 2-piece pole.
Sure.
And that's one of the things that I would highly recommend to anybody shopping for these. First and foremost is look for a 3-piece pole that can get even smaller, because the benefits are definitely there. And one is that you can put them in your suitcase and travel with them. That's a huge benefit to me. 2, you can put them in a pack and they don't take up as much room. That's another benefit.
Great. Yeah.
And you know, most of them have straps that you loop your hands through. These don't have straps because these are super old, and I actually cut them off for something I was doing. But the straps can be great to just hang on your pack too. Most packs have like, you know, kind of compression straps on the side. Hiking poles fit perfectly, or trekking poles fit perfectly on the side of packs like that.
And running it through the loop ensures that if it falls out, it'll stay retained.
And you can put a small carabiner on your pack so that you kind of carabiner in the grab handles or the lanyards on that. So that's kind of a benefit. First and foremost is the 3-piece set or 3-piece pole. So this is an example of,
oh goodness,
as I knock everything around. I know you guys listening to this can't see it, so I'm going to try to describe them. So I liked this LifeLink brand that I first used, and I said, you know what, I'll try a second variation of these LifeLink poles. So I looked at a collapsible 3-piece set. So basically these have 3 sections, and same thing. It's like a twist lock. You can collapse these.
And what would you guess the measurement from the handle to the first piece is? I'm just trying to think for audio listeners.
I would say
2 feet, maybe?
24 inches.
Yeah,
I'd
so
say
about 24 inches long is your first segment.
Yeah, so they can collapse to about 24 inches versus maybe 36 with
which is great.
The long ones, and that's the benefit, is that you can fit them into smaller spaces, like a carry-on suitcase or something like that too. And I like that option because it allows me to travel with them, and I think there's a lot of benefits to being able to take your trekking poles with you in certain situations like that. So, but as I mentioned, these are the twist locks. So one of my gripes is that I hate twist locks. I can't stand them. I think they're kind of a flawed design, because if you loosen them too much, you can slip the screw out of the housing, and it can be a pain to get back in. And sometimes that strips out, so the screw that you're tightening can strip out. And
Gotcha.
I've had that happen on a set of actually these.
So
lifelink
with
poles are
repeated
like that.
use.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll go to collapse them, and something doesn't work right, and you have to sit there and mess with it forever to get it collapsed. And I just don't like them because of that.
So no twist lock.
Right.
Okay.
I would advocate against a twist lock for a trekking pole.
Okay.
So
I guess my next question would, what would be the alternative to a twist lock?
So that is one of these things. And this is basically a compression fitting.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a latch.
Okay.
And what this does is it's got its own internal, I guess, ability to tighten. So this is actually a kind of a nut within itself. So you can actually loosen this.
So it's adjustable.
Right. So each level that these collapse has this little pressure fitting, and it's like a little latch that compresses.
Yeah.
So you can tighten this, so as you loosen the latch and you can slide the pole up and down, you can tighten that fitting and then compress it again.
So that definitely seems like a much better option.
I think so, and you just have to be really careful with these to make sure you tighten these well, and that
so they don't get too loose
tight.
on you.
Yeah, exactly. Gotcha. Because there's nothing worse than going to hike up something and then your pole collapses on you.
Yeah,
especially
if you were relying on it for weight bearing.
Exactly. So then the next thing that I like to advocate is to use a witness mark on trekking poles.
Yep.
So I have a blue line at the dimension that I set them at. So
I don't know if we've talked about witness marks on here before.
I don't think I have.
But it's just a paint marker, right?
Yeah, right. So it's
go to like craft store and get a paint marker.
Exactly. So this one's blue, so it's a paint marker, and it typically stays on there pretty good, and it gives you a visual indicator of where to get it back to whenever you put them back together. So, like for instance, I have my bottom section set at 54, and I have my top section set at 44. Those are just the numerical settings on these trekking poles. So.
Yeah.
And this is actually a pretty good set that I picked up on Amazon. They're a full carbon fiber pole, so they're super light. So even the top section is all... Here, let me see if I can do that.
Yeah.
That's carbon fiber, hollow. Yeah. So each section is a hollow carbon fiber tube, compresses all together, and they actually compress much smaller than the triple direct poles that I think I was just talking about. So in all, once those three sections are together, I think you're probably looking at 20, I don't know, maybe 2.5 feet. So yeah, 24.
So 30 inches,
yeah, so about
approximately.
30 inches, I would imagine, and that's from tip to the handle up here.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and I don't know, I might say that the other ones that are twist locks are probably compressed to the same size. However, you've got a weight savings with the full carbon fiber pole.
Yeah, I mean it looks super light.
Yeah, and then when you get into the grip, I've found that Cork grips are much more comfortable. So this is made out of cork versus
rubber.
A rubber grip.
Is that for sweat?
Yeah, and I think you actually, as your hand heats up, you actually get more grip onto a cork handle than you would with a rubber.
I hate the feeling of sweaty rubber.
So those are kind of the features, and then when you move into the tip, that's actually one thing that I want to bring up, because whatever you go with in terms of a hiking pole, make sure that you can order replacement tips, because there's nothing worse than screwing up a tip or a basket gets lost or something like that, and I'll go through what those are in a second.
Okay.
But there's nothing worse than not being able to get those replacement parts if something happens. And I learned that with the very first set of poles I got.
They're just not replaceable
these
at all?
lifelink poles. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I had one of the tips break on me on my very first poles, and I went to the website and contacted the company. I probably spent 2 months trying to get a set of replacement tips from this company. That's one reason why I don't use them anymore. But that was a problem of mine, is I could never get replacement parts. So make sure you can get those. Lecky is another big trekking pole manufacturer. I don't personally own any Lecky poles, but I've heard a lot of good things about them, and they offer a lot of replacement parts like REI. You can walk in and buy new tips and baskets and things like that too. So that may be a more beneficial brand to look at just from the perspective of being able to get readily available replacement parts.
That's a great point.
Because even though I bought these on Amazon, I didn't find any replacement tips on Amazon either. So I kind of took a chance and said, they're fairly inexpensive. So if something happens, I might just buy another pair. And I actually do have 2 pairs of these.
I was going to say better to just order a backup set.
I have a backup set that I keep in my vehicle because I like trekking poles so much that, I like to be able to use them if I had
no
to.
bounds.
Right. So the other feature of these and most trekking poles is they'll have, most good trekking poles come with like a rubber protective boot. These have them right here. So it comes with a rubber protective boot that fits over the bottom of the trekking pole. So the actual tip that's on the trekking pole has a rubber cover to go over it.
And the tip of the trekking pole is made of metal?
It's actually made of carbide.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a carbide tip, and over time it will wear down.
Sure.
And you need to get replacements. So, oops, jeez.
That was the carbide tip
Stabbed my microphone.
for the listeners.
This is a good example of what worn out tips look like. I know most people can't see these, but these are my heavily used freaking.
I was like, that has to be the rubber covering because there's just no tip on there.
Yeah. Hold on, let me try to get this up here.
Those are very muddy.
That's what a carbide tip looks like when the carbide's gone.
Okay.
So it literally just wears down to the metal, and then you need to replace them at that point. And most of the time you can replace them with a hairdryer, so you just heat up the old tip, pull it off, and then put on the new one. So
I thought you meant literally replace the tip with a hairdryer.
Yeah, no.
Okay, that's a tip.
I guess I haven't used these in a while. There's spider webs going on here. Anyway, so that's kind of something you want to look for too, is to ensure that they. I like the coverings, and most people confuse these coverings with something that you can use to hike with, and you can, but eventually you'll wear through this rubber boot.
So do they make any tips for different terrains? Because I'm trying to think, like during our Constellation thing, I probably wouldn't want to put a carbide tip onto concrete.
Well, yeah, you would think that. So some companies do make replacement tips that aren't carbide. However, I kind of just use carbide tips.
I just didn't know if there'd be an advantage to like a rubber foot or something.
I actually like the grip of the carbide tip into things like asphalt and concrete and things like that too. There's you actually get some purchase with those. So I've always just kind of dealt with the fact that it's going to wear down the tips.
Sure.
And it is what it is.
Just swap them out.
Yeah. So like when we were at that Mammoth Sniper Challenge, I know I keep going back to that on gear tasting, but however, it was such a great test of equipment to be in something like that, because you're on your feet for multiple days and you're hiking up and down these hills, and some of them are paved roads. So, and granted, it was not concrete, it was asphalt, but you would hear me clip-clopping around, coming up on somebody, and we were passing people left and right. So it was funny. So this is a good trekking pole story. So the first year I did Mammoth, this was 3 years ago now. Everybody made fun of me.
Yeah.
So JB, Jason, Bryan, they were all like, "Oh, look at that! You got trekking poles in it." And dude, by the end of that event, guess who all had trekking poles the next year?
They got their phones out, adding them to their cart right then.
Exactly, because they saw the benefit. They saw how fast I was moving with them. And it really is. It's a mechanical advantage. It gives you an advantage over everybody else. If you're dealing with the speed thing, the main benefit, obviously, is to save your knees and things like that.
Well, and that, I think, is the best thing. Like, I was going to bring that up, especially with the Constellation thing, because we had timed event. And, like, I hike for fun, and I don't have a pace in mind.
Right.
When you're under a time limit, having anything that gives you an advantage or saves your knees from having to go to a time, that would be a huge benefit, because having to hit a certain time sucks.
Yeah, I think the time at that original... the original Mammoth Sniper Challenge was 19 minutes a mile, I believe.
Which sounds like a lot until you got
like
50 pounds of gear on your back.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
different
and you're moving
levels
up
of
and
terrain.
down terrain. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. So anyway, you can get these rubber tips for the bottom of that. And there's actually a metal insert you can see inside this rubber tip.
I wonder if it helps it from poking through.
It does, but over time, it's still going to break through.
Gotcha.
So they're only so good, and I just don't see a benefit of putting these on the poles and then hiking with them. Because
I gotcha.
The other thing too is they can fall off.
Yeah, and
then you're just back to the carbide tip anyway. So might as well just
start with the carbide
exactly.
tip. I'll have to try that.
That's kind of how I feel about those. And then there's two types of baskets you can get. You can either run them slick without any baskets, or you can put, these are kind of like hiking baskets, which are a smaller diameter. I'd say it's probably the size of a dollar coin. So like an Eisenhower dollar, I think that's right. Eisenhower dollar?
50-cent piece.
Yeah, let's say
Eisenhower was on
Gold
the 50
Eagle,
cent piece.
Silver Eagle, something like that. Anyway.
Large coin.
Yeah, so that's about the size of the hiking basket. And then there's snow baskets, which are really big, and those are used to
almost kind of
ski
do what
with.
snowshoes
right.
do.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you can snowshoe with them or ski with them, and that's
Cool.
what the larger baskets are for. It's basically dispersing. What is it? It's displacing more snow.
Yeah, spreading out mass
right,
on
exactly.
the surface.
Yeah, so you're less likely to stab this all the way through the snow. It kind of rides on the top of the snow because you're displacing more.
That makes
of
sense.
That. Yeah. So the hiking baskets are really to keep debris from coming up onto the trekking pole. So when you poke through leaves and things like that, and nature,
Yeah, you don't want to be trash collecting.
right. Yeah, that way you don't stack up a bunch of crap on there. However, that really does happen even with regular trekking poles, because you can see these have been through the ringer, and you can see the hiking basket starts to wear down. So there used to be ridges or edges on the hiking basket, and then they eventually wear down. But the point is that this kind of reverse cup design of the hiking basket prevents debris from coming up onto the pole.
I gotcha.
It still collects down here,
Sure.
and it can become a huge mess, which these have happened to these obviously many times. But like during that Mammoth Sniper Challenge, it kind of fluctuated between freezing temperature and non-freezing temperature. So what would happen is the mud that was on the bottom of the trekking poles as we were going through areas would actually freeze, and these would become big clumps of mud, which increases the weight of the pole.
Yeah.
So you really want to get that stuff off
That's
there.
a hindrance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are kind of the features and things like that of trekking poles. I really think that kind of covers the main features,
Awesome.
so to speak. Hiking baskets, snow baskets, grips, collapsible poles. Yeah, and then the technique with these is that when you're going up the hill, you're holding them in a standard grip, because that's kind of what.
And the
you're
standard
putting your
grip is
weight on.
basically just putting your hands at the top of the poles.
Right.
What should you set the height at?
So the height is good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So when you put a 90-degree bend in your elbow,
Okay.
and your hands are straight out
Yep.
at a 90-degree, that's exactly where you want your poles at.
Okay.
So, and you want to check that with boots too. So whatever boots you're wearing or wherever you want to put on your hiking boots, and then you want to set that.
Yeah, because you change your height.
As a complete
I got
90,
it.
as
All right.
like a complete 90-degree angle
Okay.
with your arm. So meaning if you were to bend your
elbow.
arm, yes, bend your elbow in a 90-degree angle, that's what you want.
Okay.
And then the other thing that you need to do once you have the height set is that you want to make sure your retention strap, so to speak, is set to where I like to come under the strap. So
Yep.
there's a way to put the strap over your wrist. You can either come from the top of the pole,
Okay.
and insert your hand through that loop, or you can come from the bottom of the pole and insert your hand through the loop. I like coming through the bottom of the strap, and then I rest the webbing of my thumb, between my thumb and my index finger, on the top of that.
So you're actually
strap.
trapping the strap in your hand.
Correct.
As you're working.
And
Okay.
that's a learned technique. There's no right or wrong way to do that. But however, I like this because when I'm coming down the hill, the technique for some people is to put their hand over the top of the pole.
Okay.
Because you're putting, you're kind of bracing the weight coming down the
You're almost
the
sort
hill.
of pushing down
right
into okay.
exactly.
That makes sense.
So I like doing that with the strap rather than putting my hand on the top of the pole. So instead of putting my hand on top of the grip, I let that webbing sit in the crux of my hand, and
makes
that's what
sense.
I use to push down on as I'm coming, or I'm
I would
going
imagine
downhill.
that technique also helps prevent probably some chafing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I could see if the lanyard or retention strap was able to move a lot more freely
Yeah.
and loose, you could probably get some nylon.
Yeah, I can
burn.
see that. That's never happened to me per se, but yeah.
Well, that
I can-
technique would be a good way to prevent it, I think.
Yeah.
Of kind of trapping that in from not allowing a lot of movement.
And you might run into blisters as well, even with that technique, if you're not used to it.
Sure.
And actually, this one is set a little bit too loose. I would tighten that up.
I was wondering what the excess strap was for, so it's actually to adjust the loop.
It is, yeah. You can adjust the loop size with that.
Got some fancy trekking poles.
Yeah. So you really want enough slack to where that is sitting about right here. So meaning if I were to explain this right now, I've got about an inch between the webbing of my thumb where it grips the top of the pole to, I guess, the hilt up here. So that's about the kind of distance that you want with that. But
cool.
You know, I've always carried a replacement tip and basket with me in my kind of loadout when I backpack.
Is it just in case?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would suck to lose.
Yeah, because I have had that happen. So I've been down a trekking pole because it literally broke on the trail. I broke a tip, and then I didn't have anything to replace it with.
You just roll with one?
Yeah. Which, I mean, you can do. And there's a lot of benefits even in having like a walking stick or a hiking staff. You still kind of get that benefit, but you don't get to maximize that benefit like you would using a pair of trekking poles.
I got you.
So,
cool.
Yeah. And that's kind of the gist of those. Seemingly enough, we've spent enough time talking about trekking poles that we've almost amassed.
Other hiking accessories: water, wool socks, and good footwear.
Yeah, cotton's rotten. Don't wear cotton socks. Grab your boots. Get some.
We'll link the other footwear episodes we've had. I think we've had a couple.
Yeah. My quick tips on boots are: get a pair that fits. Try leather-lined boots; they're great. Use wool socks.
Break them in. Break your boots in, please.
Yes.
We've had several people come to muster with brand new boots. It doesn't work well.
I personally like Loa Renegades, the leather-lined version. They're amazing.
Like
you will
butter.
not go wrong with them. I've been through 2 pairs already. Also carry some Leuco tape with you to treat hot spots. That's a good thing. And also some alcohol pads because you need to clean the area first before you apply anything adhesive to it so it sticks. Yeah. So
otherwise
it will not stick. It will not stick to sweat.
Yeah.
In feet that are slick. So yeah, my 2 cents on that. Get a good backpack that's lightweight. Always look for the lighter. Lighter's better. In most situations, at least with trekking poles, I know that lighter seems.
And
to
really
be better.
Consider what you should be carrying on a hike.
Yep.
There's not a lot of reason for a bunch of stuff people carry.
Yeah. Get a hat. Screen yourself from the sun. Don't get skin cancer.
It's like a 24-minute conversation on trekking poles and a 2-minute conversation on the other stuff.
Enjoy the nature.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Gear Tasting Radio. Remember, if you have questions, use the #tag Gear Tasting on any social media network. We will find them and answer them here on the show. We did have a question ready on this episode. I promise we will get to them. But, you know, we went a little long with trekking poles, so apologize. And if you're so inclined, if you like the show, what you can do for us is to please head over to Apple Podcasts or on iTunes and please rate and review the show. If anything, leave us 5 stars. We would very much appreciate it. We would hope that we had earned your 5-star review. If not, let us know what we can do better. Give us some feedback. We very much appreciate feedback, and we're always up for hearing it. But rating it 5 stars will allow Apple to show it to more people. We'll get better content, allow us to have people on the show and things like that. So very much would appreciate that. And last but not least, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/ITSTactical. We've got a few perks to give you back in return for your support. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah. Return for your support. Thanks for listening.